Welcome to The Big Rich Show. This podcast will focus on conversations with friends and acquaintances within the four-wheel drive industry. Many of the people that I will be interviewing, you may know the name, you may know some of the history, but let's get in depth with these people and find out what truly makes them a four-wheel drive enthusiast. So now's the time to sit back, grab a cold one, and enjoy our conversation.
Whether you're crawling the red rocks of Moab or hauling your toys to the trail, Maxxis has the tires you can trust for performance and durability. 4 wheels or 2. Maxxis tires are the choice of champions because they know that whether for work or play, for fun or competition, Maxxis tires deliver. Choose Maxxis. Tread victoriously.
Why should you read 4Low Magazine? Because 4Low Magazine is about your lifestyle, the four-wheel drive adventure lifestyle that we all enjoy. Rock crawling, trail riding, event coverage, vehicle builds, and do-it-yourself tech, all in a beautifully presented package. You won't find 4Low on the newsstand rack, so subscribe today and have it delivered to you. All right, today's episode of Conversations with Big Rich, we have Dean Bulloch, the Iceman. We are going to discuss with Dean his early years growing up and how he became the Iceman. So, Dean, thank you very much for being here and carrying on a conversation with me, and kind of a campfire talk. So, just tell all the stories that you want to tell. Thank you for being here.
Oh, I'm glad. I feel honored you asked me to be a part of this, and we'll just see where it goes.
Absolutely. Let's start on your early years. Where did you grow up?
I grew up right here in Cedar City, Utah. Come from a ranching family. Had very little money. Motorcycles were always my thing. That's what I wanted. I wanted to have a motorcycle. I wanted to race motorcycles. And we couldn't afford it, really. I worked my butt off hauling hay and being a farm boy helper and doing everything I could do and saving my shekels so I could get a motorcycle. And I got a job at Ron Sporting Goods, the Honda dealer here in town, when I was 13 years old. Why he hired me, I'll never know, but he did, and I was able to get a motorcycle and start racing. That was my passion. That was my dream. And my parents didn't like the idea of it, but one of my best friends, Mark Mortensen, him and his brother and his dad, they raced. And of course, back then, this was in 1970, they traveled around the state of Utah and Nevada and raced. And I had no way to get to the races. So they had a single cab truck back then, there was no club cabs or anything like that. And we would put 3 to 4 motorcycles in the back of the truck. The 3 of them would ride in the cab, and I would be in the back of the truck in a sleeping bag, a blanket, or what have you, laying in between all the motorcycles. And that's how I got to go race.
Nice.
But I never complained. I just thought it was the greatest thing ever that I could go to the race. And they helped me through that until I was able to, that happened until I was 16. My first car was a I gotta think about this so I don't lie, a 1958 Oldsmobile 98.
A tank.
Oh, it was a tank. This car, you could park 3 new ones inside it, And it was a pile of shit, but that's what I had. And I custom built myself a motorcycle trailer. I made a hitch and put on the car so that I could go to the races myself without having to ride in the back of the truck. And it's funny because to this day, I still have that trailer.
Oh, nice.
And it is the crudest thing you've ever seen in your life. There was no MIGs and TIGs back then. It was all stick welding. And I blew holes all over in it, and the welds looked terrible. But you know, it was mine, and I drove junk, but I had a really nice race bike.
Of course. It's kind of like most of our racers or rock crawlers, especially when they're getting started. Yep, we get it.
Yep, but I continued to race. I finished high school. I was a terrible student. I barely finished high school. I passed with straight D's, and that's not a joke. That's a fact. But I wanted to be a mechanic, and I got into the mechanic field, and I really wanted to be a marine technician. In the summer times when I was in high school, I would go to specialty schools to work on outboard motors and stern drives. I left Cedar City when I was 17, but I had my outboard certificates, so I had passed everything. I was pretty proud. I had, that's called OB1. I had my certificates. Didn't tell anybody, my parents, nobody. I quit my job, loaded my tools, and left. I was going to go to California.
Lots of boats.
Yep. Go to California, try and get a job, work on boats. I don't know why I started that way. And I turned around and I headed north. I went to Orem. There was some boat shops up there, and went to the first boat shop. And he's like, yeah, you know, we'd hire you, but you're a little young. Probably not. So the next boat shop I went to was Robertson's Marine, and they had a store in Springville, Utah, and one in Salt Lake City. And I went in there and threw my certificates down on the table, and he says, well, that's great. I can see you passed with 100%. I can tell you really want to do this, but did you graduate high school? And I'm like, what does this have to do with my job? Well, luckily I did graduate high school, but just barely. And I had my certificate. And I handed him my graduation certificate from high school, and he's looking at it, and I says, can I ask you why you needed my graduation certificate? He says, yeah, that proves to me that you can finish something. Made total sense, but it you know, when he first asked me that, it didn't make any sense at all. He says, we don't have any openings at this store, but in our Salt Lake City store, we have one of our technicians that's out with back surgery, and we have a temporary job. I'm like, I'll take it. So I went up there, got the job. Within a matter of months, I was moving up the chain, and it wasn't a temporary job. I met Pauline, my wife. We'd went out a little when I was in Cedar. She's from the Richfield area, come down here to go to college. We met, dated for a while, and then I moved, and that kind of went away, and we ended up getting back together, and we ended up getting married about 2 years after I left Cedar. I was still racing. So I got paid once a month. And we got married. I blew my paycheck on our honeymoon. We had no money, like literally no money. My birthday was coming up. She went and scrounged money out of the curb and gutters and on the streets and come up with 35 cents to buy me a cake mix and make me a cake for my birthday. So a couple of days after my birthday was my 1 month where my paycheck was coming in. Got my paycheck. Well, I had broke the rear hub and spokes and everything out of my race bike. I had the parts on order through Honda Suzuki of Salt Lake. I took that paycheck that we really needed to live. I went down and spent everything but $17 of my whole month's paycheck on my race bike so I could go back racing.
Were you racing for a purse? Was there any kind of purse, or was it all trophy?
Back then it was trophy. There was
Wow.
no purse. And boy, I tell you what, I got home and Pauline was like, "Are you kidding me?" But the whole thing to me was racing was so important in my life that I had to have my bike back together so I could go racing. You know, when I met Pauline, I met her on a Friday night at a dance. Saturday morning, I took her to a race.
So she knew you were a racer.
Yeah. My family grew up with me racing. My wife grew up with me racing. So it wasn't anything new to them. It was pretty hard for her to think that we had to live another month without any money. It's crazy how life goes. And from there, I continued racing motocross until 1982, I think, was the last year I raced. I ended up racing in back then, it was the expert class, it wasn't the pro class. They paid a little bit of money when you got to the expert class, but it wasn't much. You know, it might help pay for the fuel and the entry fee, but the entry fees weren't that much money either. More of a good old boy sport. I think about the racers of today. These guys are pure athletes. They work out, they train, they do everything they need to do. Well, we would go to the races, we'd set up our tents, have a big party, get drunk, have hangovers, and go out and race the next day. You know, there was no training. We rode a lot, we practiced a lot. But, you know, I look at the true athletes of today, and boy, has that changed.
The dedication to their trade or sport. But then again, it's no longer, when you make that step to that level of professionalism, it becomes a job. It's not just your passion anymore.
Exactly. So I had bought a trials bike. I bought the trials bike in '79, and I bought it just to play on, and you know, I bought an RL 250 Suzuki, and it was a fun motorcycle. And after I quit racing motocross, I'm like, you know, I want to go to a trials competition. I want to see what this is all about. At that point in my life, I had got into the snowmobiles too. I had already been, you know, doing drag races and cross-country races on snowmobiles, and I loved that. So I went to my first trials competition. I didn't know anybody there. I went by myself. I had a lot of fun. I learned a lot. And trials is, you know, really similar to rock crawling, so they use the same courses for multiple classes with some changes. I ended up, I signed up in the novice class because I didn't know how I was going to do or much about the sport. Well, I ended up winning in the novice class. The amateur class rode exactly the same course. The guy that won the amateur class, his name was Dean Nelson. And I just went up to him casually, more of a friendship thing, and I says, wow, man, I ended up beating you too, because we did the same course.
That must have endeared him.
And he told me that I could not beat him on his worst day.
Nothing like throwing out a challenge.
I tell you what, and he knows this because I told him after I far surpassed his riding ability that I needed to thank him for giving me the drive to kick not only his ass but everybody else's. And that's it's funny how it happened, you know. If he wouldn't have said that, I don't know where I would have went in the trials. But trials was my love. In 1988, I got my first factory sponsorship. Montesa Honda had just bought Montesa. So they had a pretty capable trials bike, and they were looking for some riders. And they contacted me. We went out, started riding. Part of it was I had to ride the national circuit. And I'm like, great, I'd love to ride the national circuit. So we created a team. There was myself, Jeff Kingsford, and Carl Mumford. We called ourselves Team Utah. And we went out and really did well. Jeff Kingsford beat me at almost every competition. But Team Utah was right there, because we were first, second, and third. We did really well, and the positions had changed once in a while. Talking about Carl a little bit in that era, Carl, my brother's wife, was Carl's aunt.
Okay.
Carl rode motorcycles, I rode motorcycles, and we're going to back up in time a little bit. So there was a lot of shit talk between me and Carl. He would tell Joanne, that was my brother's wife, and his aunt, that he could beat my ass any day of the week. But I actually raced and Carl didn't, and there was a lot of smack talk through Joanne. So I got to where I really disliked Carl. I wanted to beat the shit out of him. And Carl had a dislike for me. In 1982 was the first year they came out with a four-wheeler. The very first year. And we ended up at a family reunion together. That morning, I jumped on my four-wheeler and went one direction, and Carl jumped on his and went the other direction. Midday, and this was down where Sand Hollow is now, before the lake, before any of that, we met in a pretty nasty rock area. And, I'm kind of like, what's this little bastard want, And I know he felt the same way. Well, it was pretty challenging where we met up, and we decided to try it.
On your four-wheelers?
On our four-wheelers. On our two-wheel drive four-wheelers.
Of course.
They didn't have four-wheel drive. That afternoon, something clicked between me and Carl. Because I helped him through them rocks, he helped me. We became the best of friends. For two guys that didn't like each other, we found a common ground and a common interest. We started doing a lot of the most extreme riding we could do with the junk that we had, because that's what we love to do. Carl started riding trials a few years after I did, and that comes into the whole Team Utah thing. In 1985, Suzuki came out with a four-wheel drive quad, the first four-wheel drive. We started doing extreme adventures. We would leave Cedar. We would pack everything on them quads we needed, and we would go anywhere from a week to a month.
Wow.
Trips.
On a quad.
On quads. Not knowing where we were going. We had picks, shovels, tents, food. We would end up in a town somewhere and get gas. And a lot of the trails in southern Utah were built by me and Carl doing these adventure rides and trips.
So what was that? What kind of trails were there to begin with? Were you guys just on game trails, or?
So the old timers, they did hash marks in the trees to find their way through from, let's say Brian Head to Panguitch, or from, their herd of cattle or their sheep or their ranch to wherever they would go, because of course the hash marks were a GPS to them.
Right.
Once we figured out the hash marks, and me talking to my dad and finding more information, there were trails there. He says, when you find the hash marks, you find the next one, you just start putting the dots together. And we opened some of the coolest trails, and we got to see country that most people will never see. That's kind of where the extreme stuff started coming in from. We both loved trials, we pushed each other hard, and that was just another part of that extreme off-road adventure. In 1989, I took number 2 in the nation on my trials bike. I had got sponsored, so I got sponsored by Montesa in 88. In 89, Fandic sponsored me with a much better sponsorship. Took number 2 in the nation. So for the 1990 season coming up, I got even a better sponsorship from Beta. Me and Carl was down at Sand Hollow practicing. I was trying to do a big ledge. We call it a splatter. So we set a rock about 4 feet away from the straight up and down wall, and we used that as a kicker to fly through the air and land up on top of the ledge. Well, I missed it by a little bit, and I came off the ledge backwards. And of course, Sand Hollow, all the sand down there, you know, I'd always hold the bike by its bars when I come off something backwards, and, you know, hopefully you plant your feet on the ground when you land and the back tire hits the ground and you're okay. Well, in the sand, my leg went crooked. So as it ends up, my right foot was setting up by my crotch because I blew my knee to pieces.
One of a couple of times that I know of. We'll get into those.
Yeah, one of many. Anyway, so that put me out for the season, and I didn't know what I was gonna do. I called Beta. I'm like, I have these new bikes. I can't do the season. And they're just like, sell them, Dean. Do whatever you want with them. We wish you luck. We hope you get better. I was in a cast back then. That knee thing was a 12-month deal, cast, just a mess. I didn't know what I was going to do. 91 came around and my leg was still stiff. I couldn't ride a trials bike. And Steve Tagney worked for me, and he's a big drag racer, asphalt drags. And he'd been on drag bikes for a number of years, and he was my service manager and a good friend. And he's like, well, let's put you a drag bike together and let's go to a race. I'm like, okay, I might as well. We went to a drag bike national. So it wasn't NHRA, it was a drag bike national. We went to that first race and I won. And it was, you know, everybody's like, who's this hillbilly from Utah? That got me motivated. We finished out that season, but we did start racing NHRA. I never won again, but I never had a first round loss in my life, and I would usually make it to the finals. I had a pretty good knack at it. So that winter I built a brand new drag bike. Went out in the 92 season, and I won the Winston Series, I won the Las Vegas Track Championship Series, I won the TNN Series. I cleaned up.
Nice.
You know, Karen Stauffer and Angelica, some of the gals that are still out there racing, they were coming up, and Pauline says, you know, you've won everything you've wanted to do. You've not got beat by the girls yet. You haven't went down on the track. Don't you think it's the best time to quit?
While you're ahead.
While I was ahead. And for some reason that made sense to me. And it's crazy because, you know, I had my Wallies, I had my gold cards for NHRA. I could go to any track and race for free and VIP, all these things. I went to the first race, which happened to be at Sears Point, which it's Dominion Raceway now. put a for sale sign on my bike, and I sold it. And I never looked back. But drag racing was one of them things, you know, you go to a national event, you're minimum gone 5 days, minimum. You're at the track for 3 days, minimum. With qualifying and everything you do, at the end of the weekend, you have about 80 seconds worth of fun. The whole time. And you're sitting in your leathers, baking. Every track is the hottest, stinkingest place. And you know, drag racing's like hurry up and wait. I loved the speed and the thrill, but everything else about it I didn't like, and so it was a good time to quit. Trials was still my love. It was still just my love. And in 1988, I bought a Suzuki Samurai, and I bought it for hunting. I got invited to go on a trip to Moab with guys with Jeeps that were back in that era, built lockers, T-cases, everything. And I had my hunting Samurai that I literally made the biggest, ugliest steel bumpers, and I had steel skid plates underneath it. And because we did a lot of hunting in our life, part of our adventures on the four-wheelers were hunting, and you know, we were going to different states, and I was destroying my new vehicle. So we took my hunting Samurai to Moab with a bunch of Jeep guys. Pretty much got laughed at.
Because it was a Samurai?
Because it was a Samurai, and I didn't know what lockers were and all these things. There was one guy, and I'm not going to mention his name, that was just taunting me, standing at the top of every obstacle with a tow strap, just swinging it back and forth, and mouthing off and mouthing off. We got home. The next day, I ordered over $8,000 worth of parts for my Samurai. I'm like, that will never happen again.
Okay, so let me ask then, and you said this drag bike guy was working for you.
Yes.
What were you doing at that time employment-wise?
Okay, so yeah, I probably should back up to that. When I moved to Cedar City, I moved back to Cedar in 78.
Okay.
I went in partnership in a power sports store, and we sold motorcycles and snowmobiles and boats.
Okay.
I had that partnership, which was not a very good one. We were all too young. I sold out of that partnership in 1982. But I started my own snowmobile rental business and repair business at Duck Creek Village on Cedar Mountain.
Okay.
When I sold out, I signed a no-compete clause for Cedar. That company dissolved that I sold out in 1985. So I still had my shop at Duck Creek. When they dissolved that company, I was getting a lot of pressure to come back to Cedar. In 1987, I actually did come back to Cedar, you know, and reopened D&P Performance down here. Yeah, I've owned my own business per se since 78.
Okay.
I just had the partnership thing that was the best business school I could have ever went to in my life. I learned a lot from it.
Probably a lot of what not to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%. We were all too young and looking in the till at the end of the day and, oh my God, look how much money we have. I didn't share quite that same thought, but that was kind of the situation. I had D&P Performance on the mountain. My company down here was called CBM Incorporated. And I reopened it as D&P Performance in 87. Going through the years before we go back, I ended up opening a store in St. George. So I had 3 stores going, and I decided to do some really stupid things like keep them all open 7 days a week, and it was pretty crazy. And trying to do that and keep racing and doing what I was doing was interesting. to say the
and you're
least.
still married to Pauline, so
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. Yeah, we just, we're working on 44 years here.
awesome. That's congratulations on that.
Yeah, that's, I think that's quite an accomplishment in nowadays standards, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Came in after going to Moab.
Yes.
And you ordered $8,000.
Yep.
And I wanted to find out what had happened to where you could afford to drop $8,000 instantly into your Suzuki.
Right.
So thank you for backtracking and
Yeah. My business has been worked very hard, put a lot of hours in and a lot of years in, but because of my business, I was able to race. People think being your own boss is the greatest thing in the world. Well, it can be at times, but a lot of times it's not, because every customer that walks in the door, that's your boss.
yes,
You're not the boss.
whether you like them or not.
Yeah, your customer is your boss.
Correct.
You know, I ordered the $8,000 worth of parts, and basically is what that was, is it was gears, lockers, lower gear T-case gears, axles, everything I could think of, so that the next time I went to Moab, I didn't get laughed at. The next time we did go to Moab, it was a whole different story, because in that little Samurai, yeah, it's short wheelbase and everything else, but because of my trials experience, I could wheelie my Samurai and keep traction and slide my clutch, and I could do some pretty big obstacles. That whole splatter technique, and we've got 747 techniques, we call them. And you know, a 747 is, you're at the bottom of this gnarly obstacle, and with a standard transmission, you just put the clutch in, go full throttle and start slipping it, and then just launch it and fly to the top. Well, you can do that in a rock crawler.
Yes.
It's a little bit different technique, but there was a lot from trials riding that came into the rock crawling.
Well, in the sense of balance as well.
Yeah.
Whether you're astride something or you're sitting in something, it's especially rock crawling. Anybody that's listening to this that are rock crawlers, you understand that it's a game of balance.
Oh yeah.
On anything, whether it's a climb, a drop, a side hill, it's
Yep.
still knowing the balance of that vehicle.
Yep. Yeah, I call it the bubble in my ass, you know. And I mean, everybody's got to have that if they're going to rock crawl or if they're going to trials ride. So rock crawling was like my next step. I wanted to be a trials rider, but because of the damage I'd done to my legs, I really couldn't go back and be on the same level.
Right.
And I didn't want to embarrass myself by going back and not being on that same level after not riding for 2 years. We started doing the rock crawling thing. There was no competitions yet, so it was a bunch of good old boys out having fun and
No organized competition.
Yeah,
It was still a competition on those rocks.
There just was not an organization that was doing it. We just kept building, you know, our samurais. Carl ended up getting a samurai. Steve ended up getting a samurai. I don't remember the year I met you, but you had a Dodge Dakota.
Yeah, actually the Dodge D50.
Yeah, the D50.
Yes.
Sorry. Yes.
You talk about going to a gunfight with a knife.
Yeah.
You know, a butter knife.
Yeah. You know, we just kept building them bigger, badder, better, stronger. The first rock crawling competition was in 1998, I believe, in Las Cruces, New Mexico. Isn't that about right?
Yeah, 97, 98, yes.
Yeah. Didn't make that one. But the very next one was in the Superstition Mountains out of Phoenix, if I remember right.
Yes.
So a friend of mine wanted me to spot for him. Went to that competition. I spotted for him. he didn't listen for shit. He wouldn't do what I told him to do. I was mad. He was mad. The very next competition after that was Cedar City.
Yes.
I spotted for him again. He blew his junk in a million pieces. We worked on it all night long. Did not go to bed. Went out the next day and he blew it to pieces again. And I'm like, I am done. I am done. This, we didn't work together. It didn't click. He had a big motor and all this horsepower and not heavy enough parts. So me and Carl was actually sitting in this building.
We're here at DP Performance.
Yes. So this part of my showroom and where the offices are now used to be my fabrication shop where I worked on the rock crawlers and, we worked on all our toys in here. There was a competition coming up. It was at Cedar City, which was the following year, because I think that first year they had 3.
Correct.
So the next year, the first one I believe was in Cedar. Me and Carl are sitting here going, we should do this. But we both had vehicles. So we did a flip, or I think we flipped to see who drove and who spot. Well, I'm not sure if I won or lost.
But you ended up being the driver.
I ended up being the driver. We go to the rock crawling competition. We just thought we sucked bad. We really did. I mean, we did the best we could do, but as far as we were concerned, we were embarrassed with our tails between our legs. And they had the awards down at the city park.
Right.
We weren't going to go at all because we were embarrassed. We didn't think we did very good. I think Carl talked me into, let's just go down and see who won and what happened. So we was like way in the back of the crowd so nobody could see us or anything
So you
like
wouldn't be
that.
embarrassed.
Yeah. They started off with the awards, in the different classes. And what was it back then? Legends? Did they call I can't remember the names of the classes exactly.
Yeah, that was the UROC. Because ARCA, I think ARCA at that point only had, they may have had 2 classes by then, but I think everybody was in one. UROC started up the same year I did when I left Cedar City and started CalRocks.
See, and I can't remember if the first competition we went to was an ARCA or a Pro Rock, or I don't exactly remember which one of them it was back then.
If it was the Phoenix, that Phoenix, Arizona race, the first one that you spotted in, that was
ARCA, wasn't it?
Yeah, ARCA on the Woodpecker Trails.
Yeah.
Because that was that was the first ARCA event I had gone to as well. We went down, Dave Burling and I went down there because of ARCA coming into Cedar, which as the club, we were helping them in getting in there, and we'd do all those cleanups and stuff, trying to get out of Three Peaks. And then the next event was Cedar, and then they did, I don't remember who did the next event here, but I think Pro Rock may have had multiple classes. I don't think UROC would have been started yet.
Yeah, I don't think UROC was started yet either.
He was like 91 or 2001.
Yeah. Anyway, we're at the city park. We're all embarrassed. They got to our class, whichever one it was, because, even Pro Mod used to be called, all the different names they had coming up through.
Yeah.
And they got to our class, and they announced first place, and, we're clapping and keeping our heads down. And then they got to second place, and they said our name. and I was like, are you shitting me? I was shocked because we just thought we did terrible. That made us feel a whole lot better walking up to the podium, and that was that was our game on right there. It's like, wow, if we finish second, just think if we put more time, money, and effort into this vehicle, We can do things with it. And boy, we really went to work on it, and we went to the next competition and we won it. And a few months later, one of the promoters, there wasn't cell phones and all that stuff back then, called me and says, Dean, BF Goodrich is trying to get a hold of you. And I'm like, for what? He says, I think they want to sponsor you. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. You know.
That would probably have been Ranch.
Very possible.
Yeah,
very possible. And I think it was. BFG, yeah. I think it was Ranch. So he says, I gave him your phone number. And I'm like, yeah, okay. You know, I didn't believe a word of it, really. And it wasn't but 2 to 3 days later, Jeff Cummins calls me. And he goes, God damn it, Dean, you're a hard guy to get a hold of. And I'm like, well, what are you trying to get a hold of me for? We would like to sponsor you. And he started going over all the details and what they wanted to do for me, and like money and tires. And I'm just like, are you kidding me? You know? He says, tell you what, we're supposed to sign this contract before we do anything, but I'm going to start shipping product out today. Okay. And like literally in 3 days, I had tires, I had stuff sitting here, and a few days later I got a check too. And I'm just like, wow. So, you know, we probably ran the old Blue Sammy in so many different stages up until 03. Todd Little, we became good friends, and he's like, hey, how about we team up and let's build you, you know, which is a pro mod today. Let's do the most badass pro mod we can possibly build. Everybody was wondering what I was doing. We literally had to cover the windows in Todd's shop because we did not want anybody to know what we were doing. That's when we built, you know, the Yellow Sammy, Zook 2, Total Changeover. The first competition in 2004 was at St. George. No, that's a lie. It was at Cougar Buttes.
Okay.
It was at Cougar Buttes, was the first competition. We finished Zook 2 one evening and had to be in Cougar Buttes the next morning. Untested, hold my beer and watch this, here we go. And we went down and we cleaned house. I mean, it was just the greatest feeling in the world, you know. Todd did such a good job. And of course, me and Carl was down there every day. We would work our jobs until about 2 o'clock. Would jump in my truck, head to St. George, work until midnight, 1 in the morning, come home, work our jobs, you know. We had a big hand in doing it too, but just kind of amazing how that went. Some of the Todd stories, and me and you have talked about a little bit. How we met was, you know, just being recreational Jeepers and let's go find some new trails and let's do something different. And I think you'll remember this. Ash Creek, which is now called Skull Canyon, me and Carl just got a wild hare one weekend. We packed up our camping gear. We didn't go hike that canyon.
You had no idea what you're getting into.
Yeah, we just let's take our camping gear and let's get in our Sammies and let's go see what happened. And I'll tell you the experience of that. It was pouring rain, pouring. And we jump into that canyon and, you know, the creek was running a little bit. It wasn't that big of a deal. And we get to an area where we're kind of trapped, and we're trapped by a tree that is actually growing out of the creek bed. And the tree had to be cut down, and we had our chainsaws and everything with us. And it's pouring rain. We got our rain gear on, but we don't care. We're going to find our way through this canyon one way or the other. And I'm cutting the tree down underwater with the chainsaw. Carl or Steve or one of them start screaming, flood, flood. You could hear the roar coming down the canyon. We jumped, we had 3 samurais, and we backed them up the face of that wall as high as we could. And the head of that flood was probably 5 or 6 feet tall. Boulders, trees, and everything coming down through there. It was crazy, you know. So the flood comes through and we wait for probably 2 hours. And we thought the water had gone down far enough. So I pull into the area where I cut the tree out of the way.
Of course, it's what you cut. It was gone now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's long gone. You know, and who knows what's changed because of the way the boulders were rolling. And I pull down in there, and all of a sudden I drop into one of them deep holes. Well, the water's running in the passenger door, had the windows down, and out the driver's door, and I'm sitting in water up to my chest.
Flooded the motor?
Oh, yeah. What a mess. So it's like, all right, you know, I wonder if winches work underwater. And we get mine winched out the other side. They're over there with their Sammies backed up on the wall, giving me the Utah howdy, their middle fingers, like, we're staying here. I pull my spark plugs out, crank my motor, and blow the water out of the cylinders, take the drain plug out, and I'm just watching, you know, water, water, water. Oh, here's some oil. Put the drain plug back in. And I finally get it started and steam the motor out. And I'm like, guys, you're not going to be able to go back. You have to come this way. So we ended up taping some things up. I drug them through the water with their motors dead, so they didn't hydrolock their motors like I did. It took us, we camped 2 nights. So almost 3 days to get through Ash Creek. Well, I told Todd Little about this. Of course, him and Jen, they wanted to come and try it and do a camping trip. And it's crazy because...
Of course, you guys were in Samurais, and Todd drove a Wagoneer.
Oh, yeah. A full-size.
Full-size
Wagoneer.
With all the glass.
Yeah. We get going through there. The first thing Todd did was rip the whole exhaust system right off from it. So the exhaust, you know, we stick her in the back of the old Wagoneer. And I told them guys, I'm like, there's quicksand in here. Like, no joke. There's really quicksand in here. Nobody believed me. I knew where the quicksand was because at that point I'd probably ran that trail 4 or 5 times. Todd pulls the big old turd in there and it sinks. Like, no getting the doors open, it sinks. We finally got him drug out of there. But what an experience. But that was the first trip where I really got to know Todd and Jen. With Todd helping us build the Zook 2, and Todd had his Willys rock crawler. Todd decided to let Jen start driving. And, you know, we formed the on-track crawler team. We traveled the country together and had a great time. You know, throughout all of this, you know, in the wintertime, snowmobiling was my love. We did so much racing, so much riding. We got to where we would all but try and rock crawl and do the stupidest things on our snowmobiles that we did in the Jeeps and the trials bikes. Some of the techniques that we'd learned from trials riding crossed over to the snowmobiles, and it crossed over to the Jeep thing. You know, hitting these big ledges on snowmobiles and flying up them and then popping them up in the air and landing flat on top, and just everything about my life. My mom said she knew when I was a little kid that I was going to be into extreme sports. I lived right up in the canyon here. There's a little red house that sets up on the hill. If you went straight up Center Street, you'd run into it. And there's ledges. It's this big mountain with ledges on it. I'd spend half the day dragging my pedal bike to the top. And I'd ride my pedal bike off them ledges. I don't know. I always liked the adrenaline rush, the challenge, and I guess that's what made me what I am today.
Yeah.
You know?
The adrenaline rush is a big thing in our sport. I think that everybody that competes or even trail rides extreme, loves that adrenaline rush. I can remember before that first event here in Cedar City, Walker Evans and Kevin Hawkins came into town and wanted to see what Three Peaks was like, and we took them up on the Dam Road, and then we took them out to West Trail because there was that one obstacle that the weekend before somebody had finally driven it, and that was Ladd.
Ladd's Ladder. Yep.
Ladd's Ladder. He got to name it. And I can remember Walker and Kevin on that thing for hours. And Walker looked at me and said, "Okay, who was that guy you said that drove this already? There's no way somebody drove this unaided, without a winch or without a spotter." And I said, "It's that guy right there. That's Ladd Brindley." And he had that 5 with bald Big O tires. And he goes, "There's no way you drove that in that." And Ladd pulled in there and drove right up it. Didn't even take a spin or a backup, just drove up. And Kevin was like, "Dang,
Yeah,
can't believe we've been beating on this thing for 3 hours." But a lot of people beat their stuff up on Ladd's Ladder. And
Oh, yeah.
it was a tough one. I don't know. Ladd was pretty good, and we always tried to get him to compete, but he was more interested in being a tow truck driver and driving that old 5. But.
We had a side-by-side event. Oh, it's been 4 weeks ago here. 2 of our rock trails were Wild West and Skull Canyon.
In the UTVs.
In the UTVs, yep. And it's amazing, to see the struggle that we had back then. And now we take these UTVs and drive right up Ladd's Ladder and all these different obstacles, and it's just amazing where the off-road has went, be it in Jeeps or side-by-sides.
Absolutely.
But yeah, we built had the Sammy done for that 2004 season, and I got an interesting phone call from Discovery Channel, and they wanted to do a documentary on rock crawling. And I'm like, wow, that's kind of cool. Well, me and Carl basically lived with the Discovery film crew that whole season. They spent time in Cedar City. They spent time right here in this building. They went to every event. Wouldn't you know, that's the year that I won the Supercrawl.
That's awesome.
And they were there with us. The show was called The King of Rocks. And it ran for years and years and years. And I remember calling them because I became pretty good friends with them, spending that much time with them. And I'm like, "When are you guys going to quit running this?" And they says, "As soon as the viewer ratings go down." Quite the year that was. Was very, very fortunate to have the success that we had in the rock crawling sports, People could not understand. Me and Carl, we didn't have to talk most of the time. We were just on that same page, and we had our little techniques and our little weird things. In 2015 at King of the Hammers, when you have to go up Jackhammer, there was a big mess up there, and everything that it was a total disaster, the lineup. All these side-by-side magazines and film crews and everybody was there. They're all trying to make the trail over here, and there's these huge ledges and boulders and nasty, like not possible to anybody. And Carl comes down and he's like, "I got this."
So he took you up the right line?
Yeah. Nobody had ever been up it before. Carl is literally out of sight. Cannot see him, but Carl will whip that winch rope, and when I feel that whip in the winch rope, I know it's time to start winching. We passed 18 guys in that crazy thing that we did, and a lot of the side-by-side guys come to me after that was over and says, "That is the most amazing thing we've ever seen in our life. How do you guys work together like that with no communication? But we've done it for so long with each other. We have these, like the whip of the winch rope. I know it's time to go. If it's time to stop, he'll stomp on that rope, and you feel that in the vehicle. I know it's time to stop. you know? And we've always, the first time we went hunting together, the very, very first time we went hunting together, and we've hunted a lot in our life together, we were in an area that neither one of us had ever been. I went north, he went south. We were hunting elk, and we told each other, well, we'll try and meet up midday or whatever. We both ended up in exactly on the same knoll at lunchtime. Just weird things like that. It takes many years to build that type of relationship and be on the same page and click together, but we did it right away, and then it just got better from there. When Carl said, I got you, like if he was on the spotter rope and he said, I got you, there was no question. I remember a rock crawl in St. George at the old rock crawling park. Was on the side of a really steep hill, and on the back side of it was a ledge, a drop-off ledge. Nobody could miss the cone on that side hill. Nobody could. Carl's like, we got this. He says, I'm going to go up over the ledge, drop off, stand on the ledge like I'm a rock crawler, put my legs into it, hanging out there midair. He says, I got you. I drove up around that cone like it wasn't even there. But it was just, everybody's like, he's so small. But Carl understands leverage and stuff better than any human I've ever met.
And you both had to have balance doing what you guys were doing with the ATVs and the
trials bikes.
And
yep.
Balance is huge.
Yep.
I mean, like I said, it's just in that vehicle, you got to understand the balance as well. So.
Yep. From that point, we did really well with rock crawling. I continued to race, snowmobiles until 2002, and I'm like, I've kind of had enough. I've done enough of this. It's time to hand the torch over, or whatever you want to call it. And my employees and everybody were racing and riding and doing everything, and I'd kind of lost my love for that a little. It was kind of almost like a plumber going to a plumber convention on the weekends, because It was my business. I'd done it for so many years, and I needed an out. And honestly, rock crawling was my out from my day-to-day business. We go through, I don't remember exactly what year it was, I believe 2007. Tom Allen from PSC came on board to sponsor me in probably 2004. Was still with BFG and had a lot of other good sponsors too. Tom thought it was time that we build a new rock crawler. He figured that Zook 2 had seen its better days. He hired Twisted Customs to build me a brand new rock crawler instead of us doing it. There was a little bit of a issue there, I'm going to say, because they were one of our fiercest competitors, Yoshua and Brian. They had never built one with a standard transmission in it before. Because you know me, I always had the standard, and I had to have it. Well, they built that Twisted Customs car, and they put the standard transmission in it, and it changed the vehicle because of lengths, because of everything. And nothing really against them guys, but that car was the biggest pile of shit I'd ever drove in my life. It did not work, and they had a good working chassis, but they had to modify that to get my standard transmission and everything in there. I hated the car, didn't like it very well. Sold it the second event to Barry Beadle out of Texas, and Barry wanted me to drive it the rest of the year. And I'm like, are you kidding me? The car wasn't competitive. So I drove it, had a really not a good year at all. I mean, yeah, we had some good finishes, but the car was not good. We went down to Texas, and Tom hired some guys, and I took Todd Little down, and we started a little fab business, and we built the next version. which we ended up putting a Jeep Liberty body on, and it was a very capable rock crawler, and that's actually the one that I finished my rock crawling career in. Oh, we'd started building some other cars for other people. Tom didn't really like it, like having to babysit it. I was flying back and forth from Texas, and before I get off that, well, I'll finish that out and then we'll go back to King of the Hammers.
Okay.
Okay, so I actually moved the fabrication business up here, and we started building. I had Todd Little, Sean Wilson, I had other guys working for me, and we was actually building competitive rock crawlers and 4400s for other people. And now I'll back up. So, Bob from Pro Rock.
Hazel, yep.
Hazel, he was the first guy that had the idea of King of the Hammers. He was the first one. He's like, and he talked to me. I know he talked to Tracy. He talked to a bunch of us. What would you guys think if we went to Johnson Valley and we had a race up the Rock Canyon? Would you guys be willing to do it? Hell yeah. Let's try it. That'd be fun. Well, Bob kept talking about it. Well, Jeff and Dave, they're like, we're not going to talk about it. We're going to do it. Pretty sure it was 07, right? The first year. So, we all show up in our rock crawlers.
There wasn't a race car out there, but there were rock crawlers.
There were rock crawlers. There was no spectators. It was like the good old boys, and we were a little teeny drop in that big lake bed. And we go out and tear up our junk and laugh and come home. I can't remember the name of the guy that won it. He was the horn player for...
Yeah, John Reynolds.
Who?
Reynolds. He had that...
Was that his name? Yeah, okay. It happens again the next year, and boy, we're like a whole lot bigger. We were still in rock crawlers, but we'd made a lot of changes to the rock crawlers. I don't remember the mileage the first year. I think the second year it was like 63 miles. Year one, I rolled over and I broke stuff and this and that. And the next year, I got in the lead, like by 45 minutes. I had it. And all I had to do was go down outer limits and drive back around to the finish. I'm heading on, coming out of the wash, going over to the entrance of outer limits. My Ford 9-inch breaks a pinion shaft, and the drive line just wipes out the brake lines, pokes a hole in the fuel cell, destroys everything. Well, we're rock crawlers, right? We break, we pretty much finish, we're done, and they're going to drag us off. So we sat there, and I'd taken my fire suit off. I believe it was Casey Curry, I think, after 45 minutes drives by. And then a little while later, I think Nick Campbell drove by. And I'm like, what are we doing sitting here? Let's just take the drive line off. We don't need brakes. Da-da-da-da-da. Let's drive down outer limits and let's finish this race.
Just in front wheel drive?
Yeah. Front wheel drive, no brakes, and lo and behold, we finished that race in third or fourth place.
So
if I would have just had that mentality of, let's fix our junk now, we'd have won it. So that was kind of the drive and the motivation, and like, okay, we're going to do this thing. We need to build a specific vehicle for this race. What we did, we built the rock crawler, the Liberty buggy, and the 4400 right there about in that same time frame. Went after it, and the next year, Dave got hooked up with Best in the Desert to have a 4400 class. So, that was part of the series and the championship. I believe the first Best in the Desert race that we did was Vegas to Reno the long way. 1,042 miles. But it was a stage race.
Right.
You know, we were unlucky enough to start dead last because it was just a random draw. At that point in time, Carl wasn't co-driving with me. Carl's daughter got cancer in her femur, in her leg. Carl was spending time with his family and doing what he needed to do.
Right.
So I had Tom was co-driving with me. You know, we take off dead last. It was so much fun and so much work. You know, we ended up finishing that race. We were second or third. I don't remember. But we lost the transmission day 2. All we had was second gear. With the way you had so many minutes to work on them before they had to go in the impound yard or take your penalties and what you had to do, you know, we just band-aided everything we could band-aid. And we finished that race and just had so much fun. So it's like, hey, let's race more best in the desert. And Dave started doing more with the Ultra 4 and just a lot of good times, you know. But doing that and rock crawling at the same time was more than I really wanted to do. In 2010, I quit rock crawling, and my heart wasn't in it. It truly wasn't in it. I kind of got burned out, so I kept doing the Ultra 4 thing. In 2012, Arctic Cat came out with a ROV, a recreational off-road vehicle, a side-by-side that was more sporty. Hey, let's start building some of them. I think the total number of race side-by-sides I built was 196 of them for other people. Kept doing the 4400 and started doing the side-by-sides because the side-by-side was my business. And I'm like, what a great way to bring people into my business. You know, started a company called Wildcat Willys, and we made aftermarket parts and cages and built race cars for people. And we started racing them. And by 2013, I started doing everything in a side-by-side instead of a 4400 or a Jeep. I kept my comp buggy, I kept my trail Jeep, but they just sat. Probably the thing that really changed my mind about going to the side-by-sides and doing this is in Easter Jeep Safari in 2012, Warren always has their run, you know, before everything really gets going. And Warren was one of my great sponsors. So me and Pauline showed up in our Wildcat, our side-by-side, and everybody laughed their ass off. They thought that was the funniest thing ever. And,
again, motivation.
And the ride was getting ready to go, and they're like, when are you going to go get your Jeep? Well, I'm not. I'm taking this. Yeah, whatever. Well, I don't remember exactly what trail we did, but, you know, they had all their film crews and they had everything, and the magazines were there. Well, they spent more time filming us than they did the Jeeps. And I think I still have all the articles from that. But everybody was shocked that a side-by-side could do that. And if you want to know the truth, I was too. But there's only one way to find out.
Yes.
So that just started pushing our limits that direction. We started racing them more. We did some of the Ultra 4 stuff. Of course, we've done the hammers of every year except for 13. And the reason why is September 21st of 2012, I got in a bad accident racing. There was a 90-foot double jump. It was the Winter Fall Fuel Fest was the race. $20,000 purse, winner take all. Well, the oldest guy there did the stupidest thing, which was me. We went and walked the course, all of the racers, It was at a motocross track. They did a great job. They put obstacles in it. The obstacles were bitching, but on them big high-flying jumps for motorcycles, they put a kicker on the lip to kick them, huck them up in the air higher. And we all decided that that was way too dangerous. Well, the oldest guy there hit the first one that they said was too dangerous, and I made it. It was like a 60-footer. There was a run out in between the 60-footer and the 90-footer. Well, I stood on the gas, and I hit it, and I come up short. And it ripped my seat right out of the frame. The front tires came into the driver's compartment. I broke my left leg in 31 pieces, broke my left hip, broke all my ribs on my right side. I was a mess, and I'd been...
The tires came into the compartment, but you didn't exit the compartment.
I didn't exit the car.
Right.
My cage that I built, the driver's cockpit, I was safe, but it ripped the seat frames right out of the tubes. The impact was so hard. It was, I've had multiple surgeries because of it. This last December, I just got 2 new total knee replacements because of it. But I had a total of 11 knee surgeries, from the motorcycle racing, my life, just my lifestyle I've had. I've been hard on my body. That took the wind out of my sails for a little while. I promised my wife, my family, I'm done racing. I will never race again. 2013 rolls around. I was at King of the Hammers, but I don't believe I was still on crutches, but I wasn't in real great shape. In May of 2013, they had one of the race series come to Cedar.
Snore.
Well, they had a race here, and I promised everybody I was quitting racing.
Yeah, but it's in your hometown.
Yeah. Told the wife, Pauline, and my kids I'm going racing, and they're like, we're not going to come and support you. You promised us you was quitting. Well, we decided to go, and I limp over and get in the car and put my belts on, and Carl jumps in, and the green flag drops, and we win the race.
The worst thing that could happen.
Yes. My family was praying to God that we would lose and I would really quit.
Because you didn't want that embarrassment.
Yep. And that just, that brought it to life, and I continued racing, and we got into I raced the full-size Wildcat. That was 13. I raced it for a couple of years. In 2015, the year model, Arctic Cat released a sport, they call it. Well, and Polaris has their 900 sport, if you will. We was doing a photo shoot for Arctic Cat out of Bryce Canyon, and we had all the media there. Well, John Crowley and a bunch of them were there, and the shit talk started. It's like, I think Polaris and Arctic Cat should have a competition at the Hammers next year. Your sport against ours. Well, that's not very fair. Ours has got a 700 in it, and the Polaris has got a 900 in it, but I'll take your bet. We'll do this. And Arctic Cat was 100% on board and everything, so we took basically a stock car. We put bigger tires on it. We put beadlock wheels on it. We put a skid plate on it, winches, bumpers, and that's about it. We go to the King of the Hammers race, and of course they had dropped the sportsman class, so there was only one class now, Open Pro, which that's the way it should be in my opinion. Me and Carl's in a little 700, and the Polaris that we had the bet with was their 900, and all the rest of them were 1,000 turbos and everything else out there. Well, me and Carl finished second.
With the 700 sport.
With the 700 sport. We definitely won the bet.
So you got everybody but Mitch.
Yep.
And Mitch, from my understanding at that point, really didn't drive the obstacles. They winched them all.
Well, and that year was a winch fest.
Right.
And that was the year that we winched around all them people.
Ah, yes.
There was no qualifying that year. It was luck of the draw. Mitch got a good draw. We didn't. It's okay. But I think Mitch beat us by an hour, you know. But he got up front and didn't have to deal with the log jams that I did. But I still felt really good about our finish.
Absolutely.
You know. And the next year, we raced a 700 sport again. We never got into the lead, but we had passed everybody. Guthrie was broke in Jack. We caught, was it Sims? I can't remember the kid that ended up winning. We caught him. I made a bad decision. We dropped into a wedge going downhill and really pinned the front tires hard. And Carl's like, let me get out and see what's up. I just stood on the gas. Well, I broke a front axle and what have you. Guthrie gets fixed. He passes us while we're fixing that. We get fixed. Mitch was hurt. You know, his car was hurt. We pass him back. We catch the leader again at the last pit. We've got the desert section to do. And we roll through the pit. We go 500 yards past the pit. We had damaged the tie rods. When I got into that V wedge, we broke the tie rods right there. Now we've got the desert section going back. It's all desert from here and we're in a 700. We get that fixed. We only got passed by one car. We're full throttle. We're doing everything our 700 could do. It was hilarious. The cat and dog chase that me and Mitch had. He'd pass me. I'd pass him. We had so much fun. But he actually crossed the line before I did. But I beat him because of time, because I started clear back. And I think I ended up, I can't remember, third or fourth, you know. But it's a lot of shoulda, woulda, couldas. But you know what? It's just a lot of fun.
So there's one story that I know of that wasn't a race. It was a BFG event. I think it was. I think it might have been at Horsepower Ranch, where you had your rock crawler and there was a bunch of trophy truck guys there.
Yep.
And everybody was sharing rides.
Yep.
So the rock crawlers were getting in with the trophy truck guys, and then the trophy truck guys got in with the rock crawlers. Talk about that one a little bit, because I think that's a great story on perspective.
You know, that was one of the coolest things that could have ever happened. So it was when we were doing the tire release for the new KM2, which Carl and myself were heavily involved with that tire. We did all the testing. My TJ was the face. That's what the vehicle they used for that release. So we had a big to-do at Horsepower Ranch. We get down there and there was Bob Standage and myself. And we have our rock crawlers displayed in the grassy area there at Horsepower Ranch. Well, the trophy truck guys are showing up and some of the buggy guys, you know, a lot of BFG people. The opening night, nobody knew who I was.
Because you're around a bunch of off-road racers,
Yeah.
desert racers,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And anyway, they're having a big party and doing what they're doing, and I'm standing out, you know, underneath the awning area, and there's all these people around. And they are just smack talking the hell out of why the hell did they bring these rock crawler guys down here, you know? And I just kept my mouth shut. There was a lot of media, there was a lot of people. Is how it ended up working out is the media is who we were supposed to give rides to in all these different aspects of off-road. Me and Carl and Bob Standage and his spotter, they send us to Mike's Sky Ranch. Why the rest of them are doing this big desert loops coming around into Sky Ranch, which it took them 2 or 3 days to get to us. They wanted us to go there find an area where we could do some badass rock crawling. Share that experience with the media on these tires, what they'll do, da da da. We got there and we set up a pretty badass course. Off-camber drops where the whole car's all but tipping over and you fall off a ledge, and it was pretty cool. It was pretty cool stuff. We ended up, Bob broke a wheel when we was doing it, and you know, they had their helicopters down there and they flew us parts, and the whole experience was just really neat. But anyway, they come in to Mike's Sky Ranch that evening, and there was a whole lot of, the media was really excited to go on the rock crawlers, and the desert racers are like, yeah, whatever, and I'm not going to name names.
Oh, come on. No.
And we get all of the media, ran through the course, scared the hell out of them, had a good time, nobody got hurt, no crashes, no nothing. And we got done earlier than we was supposed to, and a couple of the desert guys are like, hey, why don't you take us for a ride? Come on, jump in. Well, my goal was to scare the shit out of them.
Because those guys were talking all this big smack.
Yeah,
and all they do is drive down dirt roads.
You know, and they didn't know I was listening to them opening night with all their smack talk. I gave them all rides. Scared the hell out of them. You know, they take off. We all head back. You know, the finish is back at Horsepower Ranch. So we get back to Horsepower Ranch, and the final night, a big banquet party and everything, and a bunch of guys got up on the podium on the little stage, you know, and told their experience with the tires and what they thought and everything else. Well, one of the top dog desert racers of that era got up on the stage and was talking about the tires. And then he says, I want everybody in this room to know that I rode with that bald guy right over there, and I have never been that scared in my life at 3 miles an hour. You know, and he says, I have all the respect in the world for these guys now after what he did today, you know, throughout this thing. And it was, I mean, it was quite an experience. And, you know, to get the guys to, I'd never thought I was better than them, but they thought that what we did was for sissies.
Right.
Boy, it really woke them up, and they had a change of heart, you know, just before the whole thing started, you know, backing up. One of them decides to take me for a ride in his trophy truck. Well, I'd already went out and rode that area. There's a big cliff out behind Horsepower Ranch, you know, southwest. And he's doing like a $140, and we're coming up on this ledge. And I mean, it's, 1,000 feet, 800 feet drop. It's big. Well, he is scaring the shit out of me. There's no doubt about it. And there's a big wash coming. I knew it was coming. Obviously, he didn't. We hit it and ripped the whole front end right out from underneath that truck. We didn't crash, and I'm like, thank God that ride's over. You know? But yeah, you know, to have them guys finally have some respect for what we did was huge. You know? They were man enough to say that in front of everybody.
That's awesome. This is a good lead into what just happened. We've only had what I consider one rock crawler in the Off-Road Hall of Fame, mm-hmm. and that's Shannon. Mm-hmm. And he's been a good representative of rock crawling and rock racing and the sports. He's a great guy. Will do anything for any racer out there or rock crawler at an event. There's been others that have been up for, you know, have been nominated but have not received the votes to get in. Other rock crawlers and promoters. And when it was announced that you were now being inducted into the Off-Road Hall of Fame, I thought that was great. Having now talked to you and learned more about your history, and then reading what was in the ORMHOF release about your background as well, with everything we've talked about, there was a lot of things in there that I didn't know, even though we've known each other since the mid-90s.
Right.
And I just want to say, I believe that you're wholeheartedly deserved of getting into the Off-Road Hall of Fame. What that shows me is these guys that are desert racing, the guys that really haven't had the respect for the rock crawling world, have now started to get into the Ultra 4 racing. They're getting some experiences rock crawling, like Cameron Steele. It's great to see these guys having the respect for the rocks, and that it's not all just how hard you can hold the pedal down. And you getting the recognition and getting inducted brings us a long ways, a big jump.
Yeah.
Because nobody has gotten the recognition since like 6 years ago. I think it's been since Shannon got inducted. So congratulations on being inducted. Hopefully that means that every year now we'll get a rock crawler in there.
Right.
It'd be really nice to see our sport be recognized.
You know, I was so honored. I had tears running down my face when I got the phone call. I felt so honored that somebody, you know, would think about me, that remembered me. And I don't know the whole process, but I guess when they have the inductee party, I'm going to find out how this all happened. But I don't take it for granted. It was something that I never even dreamed about because I figured that was out of my reach. And to actually have it happen is just so special to me.
It's great to see you in there.
No,
really
thank
is.
you. It's a big deal. It's a huge deal. I don't know what else to say other than I'm just so honored that it happened, and obviously I done something correct in my life, or I touched somebody, you know, in somehow or some way that made them think about me. Throughout a lot of the things we've talked about, you know, I've been presidents of, you know, the Utah Snowmobile Association, clubs in southern Utah, the president of the Trials Association. I try and stay involved in, even though I'm not racing, I try and stay involved in the off-road community. I still have people contact me that want me to do tire tests for them, want me to do photo shoots for them. I've been a stand-in driver in side-by-sides for a lot of famous people. They're not really driving, I am. You know, I love being involved in this off-road community because it's part of my life. I'm pretty sure I'll stay involved until the day I'm dead or I can't do it anymore.
That's awesome. Kind of retired from the business end of it.
Yes.
And with DP Performance, your kids are running the business now, and you get to go out and play a little bit more?
Yep. Getting ready to head to Moab tomorrow. You know, we'll spend a week there. We're constantly riding somewhere off-road all the time. I bought 2 new vehicles, let's see, probably in December, January. And I probably have, between the 2 of them, I'll bet I've got 6,000 off-road miles on them already.
Nice.
You know, I just like to ride. I like to spend time at my ranch. That's my goal in life, is to enjoy the rest of it. Recreating off-road, my wife loves it. I think my wife likes it more than I do. You know, we enjoy going to do different things, different places. We did something kind of crazy last year, and we bought the Moab book of the 101 trails of Moab and the surrounding areas. And we're checking it off. We're going to do every one of them, whether they're extreme or not. we're going to go do these trials. We're going to go see these things. I've been officially retired for over 2 years. But even before that, we hear of some cool place to go riding, we're there. It doesn't matter what state it's in or whatever. And I meet a lot of people. We do a lot of jamborees and rallies. We started a new organization a year ago called the Can-Am Crew. Because of COVID this year, we've only been able to put on one event, but it was a great success. Between DMP Performance, my business, and myself, and a few other really good key people, we're going to be doing more and more recreational events, not races.
More social.
Yeah. We have rides for beginners, intermediate, advanced, expert riders. I did, I think I told you I did the Skull Canyon and Wild West. And I put on they're a 10 rated trail. The people that went in my group said these are the first 10 rated trails we've ever been on. Because, you go to something that's rated hard in Moab and you could almost drive your dually on it, and I guarantee people, I said, guys, there's guaranteed body damage. If you ride on these trails, you are going to be an extreme rock crawler. And some of the side obstacles that I put in and the stuff that we used to do in the buggies, and to get a side-by-side to do it. And there's things that a buggy will do that the side-by-side won't, trust me, But what we can get them to do is just totally amazing.
Oh, I agree. Well, Dean, I want to say thank you for spending time with us and sharing your history. And you're part of our history with rock sports, and I really appreciate the time this morning. And again, congratulations on getting into the Off-Road Hall of Fame.
Thank you.
And hopefully, you're the beginning of that flood, and hopefully that we're not going to go another 5 or 6 years until we get another rock crawler in the Off-Road Hall of Fame. There are a ton of guys out there that deserve it.
Yes.
And it's all about getting the other forms, the motorcycle guys, the desert guys, all of those people to understand that there's more to it than just being able to go fast across the desert.
Yeah, there is a lot more to it. And, I'll put the offer out right now. I mean, if anybody would want to come and experience extreme rock crawling, I'd be more than happy to take them out and show them that experience.
Yeah, and what? There's more to Utah, southwestern Utah, than just Sand Hollow.
Oh yes,
there are trails out here that we built back in the '90s and the early 2000s that still hold the test of time.
Yeah. I haven't tried Wrecking Yard yet in my side-by-side, but that will be this fall when the temperatures cool down, and I'm going to see how a side-by-side does in the Wrecking Yard.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
I opened up a trail that me and Sean Wilson built in our buggy. We've just finished reopening it. Nobody had ever done that trail, shy of maybe 3 or 4 people. Me and Sean did it together. I've reopened it. We're naming it the Sean Wilson Trail.
That's fantastic.
And it is extreme. It is full on in your face. I'm very, very shocked that we was able to get the side-by-sides through it. It's one hell of a challenging one, but, without 35-inch or bigger tires and everything that we've did to the side-by-sides, there's no way. But, if somebody wants to experience something like that from a different aspect of off-road motorsports, I'd love to show them that experience.
Well, that's great. I'd like to get a story done on some of the local wheeling beside Sand Hollow for the magazine as well, and some more UTV stuff. So we'll have to talk about that in the future as well.
Perfect.
Okay, Dean, thank you very much, and congratulations.
Thank you.
If you enjoy these podcasts, please give us a rating. Share some feedback with us via Facebook or Instagram, and share our link among your friends who might be like-minded. Well, that brings this episode to an end. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll catch you next week with Conversations with Big Rich. Thank you very much.